Perfect. Let's see. Okay, I think we are live here now. Let me go double check in the group. And now that we're live, Phoebe's going to go start pawing at stuff and making noise.
The nature.
Yep, always happens. Okay, happening now. Let's see. Yep, we're in here. Okay, we're live. I just wanted to be sure we're in the right place, right? Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our second ever live interviewing another trainer here. Today we have Amber Quann, and she owns Summit Dog Training out in Colorado, which is really awesome. They have like a bunch of trainers on the team. They do a bunch of stuff. It's a really well-renowned business. So if you live in that area or you want to work with them virtually, absolutely reach out to them. We are going to talk today about all things airline travel with small dogs, which is one of the most wonderful things about small dogs is how conveniently sized they are. They can go lots of places that big dogs can't.
Yes.
But before we get started with our questions, can you tell us a little bit about Jamie?
Yes, I can. Jamie is currently resting beside me. Let me see if I can relocate my camera. We have a flop there on the Rubbermaid bin, which is a favorite nap spot. Jay is a 3.5-year-old Papillon, and he's been with me since he was 12 weeks old. We brought him home March 2020, shortly before everything.
Yeah.
So he is a pandemic puppy without intending to be a pandemic puppy, and he has been my travel companion since day one. You know, I flew with him to pick him up, but then we have, despite the pandemic, been able to do quite a bit of airline travel over the past 3.5 years. He's been to, I don't know how many different US states, I lost count of that, but he has been to Europe with me twice so far, and we're going again in September. We have family who live in the Czech Republic, so we go and get to visit them on occasion, and so he gets to go with us. So that is one of my favorite things about having a small dog is the ability to say, you know, I'm going to go for 5 weeks, and he can come without
all the stress.
Right, to do a cargo experience. He can be right with me the entire time, and it's just so much more accessible than when I had a big dog. So we're living that full life, but otherwise he's been to Washington State and been to like dog training conferences with me, and a lot of that's made easier by the fact that we can just book a ticket and fly.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. I need to start bringing my dogs with me on trips from now on. Well, today I'm going to learn all about it.
Yes.
Also, just so all of you guys know, Amber is teaching me just as much as she's teaching you, because I have never traveled with my dogs, even though it's something I do want to do. So we're all learning together today. We do have a little list of pre-planned questions just so that we have a few different things to talk about. But for any of you who are, popping in, watching, if anything that we're talking about raises another question for you, please feel free to ask the question in the comments, and we'll go ahead and highlight it here so that we can talk about it. So this can be very conversational for any of you who are sitting here watching. It does not have to be strict or rigid or anything like that.
We can go on any tangent.
Oh yeah, I'm all about tangents, so totally cool with that. So very first question that we have today for you: what considerations do you make whenever you are deciding if your dog is a good fit as a travel partner?
Yes, I love this question. And the short answer is thinking about what our dogs enjoy in their daily life and what they maybe don't enjoy is a really good place to start. If we have, I like to think about this airline travel comfort as a spectrum. We have on one end, we have dogs who are, maybe we could label it devastated with that type of intense situation, which is the airline experience. We have humans who are devastated by the airline experience. So our dogs are the same, that behaviors look like extreme stress behaviors, extreme, discomfort. We might see, reactivity, or we might see like inability to eat and just kind of becoming a shell. So that's on the one end of the spectrum. And then we have kind of a middle of the road, maybe dogs that are going to tolerate whatever we throw at them in the airline setting, but they're not necessarily going to thrive on that. They might accept it because that's in their nature, or the training we've done. They might say, okay, I can endure this, but they may not be thrilled. And then we have the end of the spectrum, that is the dog that's enjoying being along for the ride and enjoying the things that they encounter, and generally demonstrating behaviors we might label as excited or enthusiastic. So eager to participate in those things. So we have a spectrum. And I think that for dogs that are on like that kind of devastated end of the spectrum, to use that label, I would consider them as like a emergency only type travelers. Like if we absolutely needed to travel, we might seek support from our veterinary team, and we might just say like, we're going to do this. It's going to be short and acute, and we're going to recognize we might have some fallout on the other side. We might have some serious de-stress period and consequences of that, and that's not something I would want to put that dog through. As a routine,
for like enjoyment.
Versus dogs that are maybe on the tolerate spectrum, I would one be thinking like, how can we improve their tolerance? How can we make them enjoy this a little bit more, reduce stress, but also like maybe we have a moderate amount of travel that we can ask our dogs to endure for us if the rewards and the things on the other end are enjoyable to them as well. And then we have the enjoy spectrum. I think cleared to travel as frequently as you and your dog can support it, provided that they're maintaining that enjoyment. Certainly we don't want to burn our dogs out on it, but for dogs that are generally thriving in those environments, I think we can travel more. So I think some of it depends on what type of frequency we're talking about.
Yeah, like somebody who maybe goes on like a bunch of work trips, once a month or once every other month, versus somebody who just kind of wants to take their dog on a vacation.
Great. And I absolutely, there's different purposes for trips. And I think we also have to consider what is the travel for. There are certain things that I might travel for where I'm not going to bring my dog because once I'm there, they're not going to have the support that they need to be enjoying the experience. And so that even my dog that generally enjoys travel, they're not going to enjoy going and, sitting in a hotel room for 3 days while I do, something that they can't participate in.
Yeah, that's true. And that's interesting too, to think about too, if your dog needs like a certain period of time to kind of decompress from something very different, right? Like that whole entire experience is probably something that even with training, it's still completely new to a lot of dogs. Are they going to be able to kind of come down from that quickly and then hop right into, vacation activities, or do they need to have like some decompression time? Are we going to see some of that behavioral fallout, all that kind of stuff? That's really important. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you're going for a quick weekend trip and your dog takes 3 days to recover, then that stress is going to be all present in your weekend activity. So knowing a little bit about your dogs ahead of time, I think is really important. And so I tend to recommend assessing how our dogs handle different component activities that might simulate an airline experience or a travel experience. So like, how do they handle the busy farmer's market? How do they handle a place that makes loud announcements over an intercom? How do they handle and navigate situations where we might encounter other dogs suddenly, or children, or moving vehicles, or people running? Like, how do they feel about those things in general? And if they can't handle them in discrete components, then the airline experience is going to be a lot harder.
Yeah, it's going to be way harder on them.
Yeah,
that's really interesting.
Yeah. There's nowhere to go.
Yeah, no, I'm just over here thinking like, is your dog friendly and social? Is your dog fearful? Right. But there's like so much more to it that you can think of too.
Yeah.
Just because it's such a different experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Second, go ahead.
Just last thought on that is like, I do think the airline environment or airport airline environment your dog doesn't have to love greeting the stranger. Your dog can be very happy in an airline environment saying, I'm staying in my carrier. In fact, that's better, right?
Yeah, probably, yeah.
I want to go greet everyone. So
Uh-huh.
we don't necessarily have to exclude dogs that may have behavior problems from traveling, as long as we can figure out ways to support and train them to be comfortable with the stimuli that they will need to accept, like, carrying your dog through a security screening checkpoint. You're going to have to interact with a person at close proximity. If your dog's not going to be comfortable with that, then that's going to be much harder. But they also don't have to be like, yes, I want to be friends with every TSA agent.
Yeah, exactly.
It's about.
Yeah, that's really important too. Okay, second question that we have here. Do you typically find that training for riding kind of in a travel carrier, because that's a really big component, right? They're going to have to be in a carrier for a really significant part of the trip. Do you find that training for riding in a travel carrier is different from just everyday crate training, teaching your dog to go hang out in a crate, in your living room or on, at a dog show or something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a few components that are different or next level from your everyday crate training. And the biggest one is teaching our dogs how to maintain sleeping or resting position when they're in a carrier in close proximity to us. I think a lot of the typical crate training, like the goal, or for many of us, is like, we crate train so that we can leave the room and we can go and leave the dog while we go to work. And in the airline situation, the dog's at your feet. The dog knows you're there, and the dog still needs to be comfortable with this idea that they're there and you're there, and they're not able to bridge that gap. So I think making sure that we're training for close proximity, and that our dogs can be comfortable, and they're not saying like, well, now I'm scratching to get your attention or barking because you're sitting right there. Can't you let me out, is a really important component to be incorporating. I think the second thing is that with our crate work, especially for those of us who are maybe not going to dog shows or different dog activities, generally our crate is in our house, quiet and peaceful. Nothing out of the ordinary. Versus our carrier needs to be our dog's comfort space on the go. So they need to be comfortable with other people walking by, with people talking to them, from people cooing, oh, is there a dog in there? They need to be comfortable with all of that, seen through the mesh of a carrier. That person looming might look a little bit different than if they were out and about. So training for different scenarios that might be in line with what they might experience while in the carrier in the airport. And then the third difference, and if you crate in the car, you're one step towards this, but movement and moving and noise, again, like our stationary crate in the house is very different than a crate that's on a roller suitcase bag and bumping along, or in an airplane where there's vibrations and humming and all of that
extra noise, all that extra movement kind of stuff. Okay, that's very smart. We have a couple questions.
Awesome.
So this first question is kind of going back to the very first point that we were talking about kind of trying to figure out if you have a dog who's going to be a good candidate for this kind of airline travel. So question here is, how can people tell the difference between tolerating, emotionally shut down, and actively enjoying? When people are taking their dogs out around town to test these potential airline environments for loudspeakers, et cetera, what should they look for?
Great question. My kind of behavior description for emotionally shut down, which is kind of the end of the spectrum, would be, it varies by dog, so you need to know your dog, of course, but kind of coming into themselves, like making themselves smaller, seeking to increase distance away from whatever it is. So if they're straining at the end of their leash, moving away from whatever is super loud, kind of something we might label as panic, move away, not able to take food. If they, especially if this is a skill that you've worked on where your dog will take treats from you, if you get to a situation around town as you're testing this and your dog won't take food, that's probably a good indication they're having a hard time. Any sort of vocalizing, whining, pacing, barking, trying to, those are all ways where the dog is seeking to communicate something. And your dog may have a spectrum of vocal communication. Not all of it might mean, devastated and emotionally shut down. Some of it might be, I'm excited and I'm overstimulated.
This is also exciting.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we got to know our dogs, and we have to look at the whole dog, but generally looking for those stress signals, tail tucked, a lot of yawning, lip licking, whale eye, kind of turning the head, seeking distance, in as many ways as possible, or using big behaviors like really barking and lunging at the end of the leash. That could also be a dog that's really not having a good time. And then kind of moving towards the actively enjoying, tolerating, I see kind of as the middle of the spectrum where the dog's like, okay, I have a relationship built up with you. I will eat the food when you offer it. I will do the things, but I'm just here.
Even if it's not my favorite.
It's not my favorite, but I'm here. I trust you. I have a good relationship. Not that our emotionally shut down dogs don't trust us. In some ways, they're trusting us a lot with being able to communicate how they're feeling. So it's not just about that, but our dogs that are tolerating, they're maybe going to be like, they'll do the things, they'll eat the food, but if given the option, they would be choosing to do something else at that moment. And then our enjoying dogs are dogs that have body language that is, it is what we might label happy. So ears up, tail up if they have a tail they communicate with, wagging, loose body language. If there's a stimuli or something that happens in the environment, they perceive it, even if it's a little startling, and quickly recover from it. So be able to reorient to you or be like, that wasn't a big deal, and move on, without it being something that changes how they are feeling about the environment. Able to take treats is a big one, especially if you've worked on that with your dog. And I always have to say that because, some dogs have a different baseline of accepting food in public anyways. But if that's a metric you use for evaluating how your dogs feel, then that would certainly be, something to test. Is your dog excited to take the treat you offer?
Yeah, totally. That's, I like what you mentioned about knowing your dog, right? Because it makes me think of Pocket, especially because she's normally very exuberant, friendly, social every time she meets a new person. And whenever she is stressed or if there is something in the environment that's stressing her out, she kind of is one of those dogs where she's sucks into herself. And it doesn't to, the regular eye who doesn't know her, right?
She's behaving, right?
Yeah, people will be like, oh my gosh, your dog is so calm and so well behaved. And then you offer her favorite piece of hot dog and she's like, no, I don't want that, right? And so then you're like, oh my gosh, wait, no, you're very stressed out right now, right? Because this is not your normal. Whereas Phoebe is completely the opposite, right? She's stressed out, she's gonna let you know. We're doing the whole body language, we're doing the barking, the lunging, the growling, all that kind of stuff. So that was just making me think of them because I'm like, they're total opposites whenever they're stressed out and how they express it.
And Jamie's example, Jamie is a resource guarder and has been since he was little, and we've worked on it and have routines and things that come out or that support us in that. And resource guarding is correlated with stress. Or can be. And when we travel for long durations and we're outside of this routine, in general, he's a happy, great guy and he's navigating it very well. But we do usually expect to see an increase in his resource guarding behaviors during the time. And so that's something that we've, just kind of understood as one of his markers that says, I'm out of my routine. I'm a little bit stressed. And now this sock that I found, instead of being like, oh, sure, you can have it back, it's going to be mine forever. And so, that's something that because it's different from his baseline, we can identify that that's an example of a way that he is expressing a little bit of stress.
Of his stress. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
There is somebody who, it's not really a question, I'm just going to highlight it because they wanted to contribute here, saying that they practice taking their dog in their travel crate on a subway, which helps with movement and weird feelings, which is super smart.
Yes.
Yeah, that seems like a really similar kind of environment to an airplane.
Okay, buses, you get in the back of a Lyft or Uber and have your dog down at your seat, because maybe you probably won't be doing that if you are the one driving your vehicle, but if you're sitting in the back of your vehicle, you can put the carrier down on the floor. The other thing that I did with Jamie when he was young, we were in the middle of the pandemic shutdown, so there was no buses or subways or any planes, but I knew I wanted him to be used to this, and so he was already comfortable napping in his crate. And I would put my dryer on a low tumble setting and have him. I put the carrier, like making sure that it's not going to vibrate off, like low setting, have it just kind of rest on top of the dryer. So he's feeling like the humming, the moving. Now, of course, if a dog was anxious about that, we'd work up and he'd be like across the room from the dryer, and then we moved gradually towards it. In Jamie's case, he was demonstrating that he was comfortable with whatever. I just wanted to build, normalcy in that. But that's another thing that I've done to build kind of like, yes, sometimes it moves weird and sometimes it bounces a little.
Yeah.
Normal.
Depends on what's in the dryer, on how intensely you're going to get shaken around. That's really smart. I honestly would have never thought about that as like a way to start to acclimate them to that, but that's so smart because like anybody can do that, right?
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah. Okay. Consideration for adults. We're not trying to traumatize our
as long as they're comfortable with it, only working them up very slowly as they show you that they're okay with it, right? Not just get over it, right? So third question that we have here on in our comment section before we get back to our little list of questions. Are there any risks that people may not be aware of that comes with airline travel for dogs?
Definitely for our brachycephalic dogs, we need to be mindful of, just breathability. I think certainly there are many people who travel with their Frenchies and their pugs, but we just want to make sure, especially if they're in the carrier for long periods of time, that they have plenty of ventilation, plenty of air, breathing normally. Also overheating, if you're on a warm flight and your dog tends to run warm, which our small dogs aren't as likely to do that as our big dog friends, but certainly there are dogs with pretty thick coat or whatever. I might consider adding a cooling mat to your carrier. Also, I travel with Jamie, I travel with a cooling bandana. He's generally not overheating much or that's not the place that he would normally be overheating, but we have been on a few warm flights, especially if one situation we got delayed on the tarmac for quite a extended period, and he's still on the plane, he's still supposed to be in the carrier, and for whatever reason it was pretty warm on the plane during that time, and so I did end up like kind of unzipping, and he was panting pretty heavily, and so I added some cool water to his paw pads and kind of pulled him up and set it on my lap so there's a little bit more ventilation, that sort of thing. So we want to be mindful of that. I think also a big thing that we need to be thinking about is knowing the rules, and knowing what we are allowed to do and what we aren't, and being willing to advocate pretty strongly for our dogs. I think that this is improved, but there are certainly have been instances where, an airline employee has instructed someone with a pet carrier to, place the pet carrier in someplace other than under their seat, and that comes with other health risks and, some unfortunate situations that have been in the news on the consequences for the dogs in that. And I think that that's the exception rather than the rule. I don't think that that's normally happening. We travel a lot and we've never had any type of interaction like that. But I do think that knowing, what the rules are is going to help you be a little bit more clear and say like, no, my dog is allowed under the seat here. And if it continues to be, no, you need to do this other thing, being willing to, be asked to leave the airplane and figure it out rather than acquiesce, because, our dogs, they do need air and ventilation. I think the other thing, safety risks, airline or airport pet relief areas certainly vary widely as far as their upkeep and sanitation. That being said, I do think that in general, the average dog that's traveling in the airport is probably pretty well vaccinated and vetted, just because there are requirements for moving dogs across state lines. There's requirements for international travel. There's those rules. So I'm more comfortable with the airline potty areas just because of the frequency of use compared to like your local park, and the statistics I think probably skew higher vaccinated. But with a younger puppy, if I was traveling, I would probably be bringing my own potty pad areas for them to use, so that we would not be exposing them to anything that would be found in those that might be found in those pet relief areas.
Okay, yeah, that's really smart. Bring all your own stuff if you've got a puppy and you're worried about it. Okay, we actually have another question before we move on.
I love that. Love these
any dog carriers you suggest for flying?
So my favorite, I've used a couple. My current favorite is the Ollie Dog Meridian dog backpack, and when we get off the call, I'll drop a link to that in the comments under the live video, so whoever's looking for that can find it. But I have a lot of thoughts that go into choosing a pet carrier. In the webinar I have coming up, I'm going to talk like all about like these are all the things that I consider, and what I found I've liked or disliked about different things. But currently, the Meridian or the Ollie Dog Meridian dog backpack is one of my favorites.
Okay. Perfect.
If you have a dog that's probably closer to the 20-pound end of the spectrum, it's probably going to be a little bit too small for your needs. But for a dog, Jamie's 10 pounds, so 10 to 12 pounds and below, that it's a good size for them. I don't know that I would put a slightly like the weight limit on dogs traveling is usually up to 20 or 25 pounds, depending on the airline. And there are some other big carriers that provide better space for dogs that are slightly larger than Jamie is.
Okay. So for our smaller guys,
yes,
that will be a better fit for them. Okay. And you'll talk about more considerations for those of you who don't have a smaller dog and your dog's kind of on the bigger end of the spectrum whenever it comes to airline travel. If you kind of want to learn about some of those considerations and finding your own carrier that's going to be the best fit for you, check out the webinar that's coming up next Tuesday. We'll talk about that a little bit more at the end of the live too. Awesome. Okay, next question that we have here in my little list. We have, what are a couple of common mistakes that you see when dog owners take their dogs on airline flights for the first time?
Yeah. I think these are kind of the two most common mistakes are kind of callbacks to things that we've already touched on before. The first is not conditioning our dogs to the carrier enough, or maybe doing like initial crate training, but then setting it aside and then pulling out the carrier the day of the flight and being like, get in, have a good time. And so I think that carrier conditioning is a lifelong thing that for our traveling companions, I think we should continue to invest time in it. For Jamie, when I have a trip coming up, I pull the carrier out about a week before, and I start having him do naps in the carrier. Like, right now he's napping beside me, but if I had something like this, before a trip, I would have his carrier. I'd ask him to get his carrier in his carrier. I'd zip him up and he'd take his nap. Instead of loose in the house, he'd take his nap in the carrier. And we do that, every day for leading up to our trip. And in addition to maintaining our in-the-house crate skills as well, which support us. So it's a lifelong thing. If I'm training and conditioning for an overnight flight or something that's going to be a little bit longer, like the flights to and from Europe, then I want to be working up those carrier skills to where my dog can sleep in the carrier overnight, beside the bed. And even if that's not what they do every night, if I'm prepping for those long haul trips, like I want my dog getting used to spending 10 hours in the carrier and being like, yep, this is a really long nap. Or this is a really long sleep time.
Kind of boring, but it's okay, right?
And so with Jamie, even though normally he sleeps in a bigger crate next to my bed, prepping for those longer haul flights, I'm going to bring the carrier back out and reintroduce it before we get to the airport. And I'm saying, okay, you're in the carrier for 10 hours. So that's one like really important thing that's that I think we need to like really emphasize when we're
like duration.
Duration there. And then the second piece is like look for ways to simulate as many different components of airline travel as possible. And that could sound a little bit tricky, but it's really, it doesn't have to be. Just finding as many different experiences that, this is a piece that looks like the check-in counter. Standing in line with my dog in a carrier, on the suitcase, and go to PetSmart or something. When I was training with Jamie, I would put my suitcase, put his carrier on top of my roller bag, and I would take him for a walk in the neighborhood. With rolling my.
I love that.
Rolling around.
I wonder if you got any looks from your neighbors. Yeah.
But he's not a traveler, so I don't care. And just like really being like, yep, these are things that you might encounter and experience, and these are normal everyday life, and not just the thing we do all at once for the very first time. And I think that's really important too. Going to some folks will go to the airport to practice, like just going to the baggage check area. I always like to do that in conjunction when I'm picking someone up or I'm dropping someone off, rather than just going to train, just to be considerate to the airline environment that it is, a government organization. It is a high security, high intensity environment. So maybe we go and we train just outside or just inside, or we go to a different place that has like accordion automatic doors, or whatever else. Is finding different ways to really make pieces of that experience normal for our dogs.
Yeah. One thing I'm thinking of just like literally while you're talking is going through the TSA line, like especially in Atlanta, because Atlanta is a huge airport and the TSA line is kind of insane. So I can think of like for my dogs, especially Phoebe, I would need to work on her being okay with the fact that there's going to be like yelling people because they're always yelling instructions at you, right? Like over and over again, put your, cell phone in here, electronics here, all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
And that, it stresses me out when I'm like ripping my shoes off as fast as I can and all of that. So I can imagine that would stress them out for sure. Yeah. So even getting them comfortable with like just people being around raising their voices could be something too.
Absolutely. Standing in line, people being, kind of jostling, because that happens, and all the variations of that.
Bumping into you, all that kind of thing.
Bumping your suitcase, like clipping the suitcase. I always travel with the carrier is pretty much always resting on top of my carry-on roller bag. So generally, if I'm standing in line, I have it in front of me to kind of prevent some of that. But sometimes people back up and they just like
bump into you too. Yeah.
Right. Just taking the dog on the roller bag to dog-friendly places and standing in line and waiting and being like, it looks silly, but
this is for a reason.
Right.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah.
I can imagine just like walking down the street with the carrier. That's hilarious.
I did it.
Okay, next question we have. Should people purchase an emotional support animal or service animal certificate online so that their dogs can go on non-pet friendly flights? And what are the possible negative implications of this? This is
Yes.
something that I hear people recommend you do really often. So I wanted to see what
Yes.
your opinions kind of were on that.
My short answer is no, don't do it.
Yeah.
And my longer answer is multifaceted. One, the FDA recently changed their regulations. So ESAs, emotional support animals, are no longer allowed for free, unrestricted, no rules on any flights, not even pet-friendly flights. If you have an emotional support animal, they still need to abide by the same rules and be small enough to fit in the carrier underneath the seat in front of you.
Okay.
And so those websites that are selling you ESA certifications or whatever, not only are, kind of scammy and spams, but they also are no longer function in any capacity to get your dog on a flight where they would not otherwise be allowed. For those who have a legitimate service animal, which is defined by the Americans with Disabilities Act as an animal that is specifically trained to support an individual with a disability.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a service animal that is specifically trained to support you, you can bring them on any flight.
Mm-hmm.
However, you do not need a service animal certificate. That is not what grants you access. The things what grants you access and having a service dog is having a disability where your dog is specifically trained to support you. So a spammy website that's saying, here, get the service dog certificate, give me money, here, I'll print it out for you, is not really, that's not what you need to demonstrate that you have an authentic service animal. There may be paperwork that the individual airline will require you to complete in order to fly with a service animal. It is not a certificate or credentialed. It is like an attestation statement, essentially. Varies widely by airlines, whether they require it or what it looks like. So do your looking into individual airlines paperwork, but you need to be like, you should have a legitimate service animal in order to fly with your dog in that capacity. And I do think that airlines are improving in how they screen for legitimate service animals. There are some limits in how they can screen based on the provisions from the Americans with Disabilities Act, but they are getting better and better at utilizing, their ability to screen within those parameters. And I do think that in general, because an airplane is not, it's not a dog friendly environment.
Yeah.
And so I do think it's not designed for dog friendly. It's not, you're taking your pet dog and trying to squeeze it in as a service animal. You are not doing a service to your fellow passengers or to people who have legitimate service animals or to people who are following the rules and taking the time to train their dogs, their small dogs, to go under the seat and be comfortable on flights, following those rules. So I think I'm a big advocate for for following the rules that have been set down for us. And that is going to make it easier for us who do fall into that category of having a small dog. It's going to make it easier for us to maintain those privileges for long term if everyone is, complying with the process. And if in my case, I had the privilege, and I understand it's a privilege to be able to select my next dog specifically so that they would be able to fit within
travel.
Right. And so for those folks who want to travel with their dogs, whose dogs do not fit within the under 20 or 25 pounds limits, want to travel, there are some cargo travel options. We might have a follow-up webinar coming up on that later this summer. One of my associates has done that with her dog. She, went and pet sat in LA for 3 weeks for one of her clients, and she took her 50 pound border
Oh,
collie
awesome. Yeah.
cargo, and she jumped through all the hoops so that her dog could go with her. So there are ways to do that. They require their own hoops to jump through, but there are options for folks that are they want to bring their dog along, that are still safe for the dog and safe for the other passengers and all of that. So long story short, I'm a big advocate for, if you want to travel with your dog, your small dog, pay the airline's fee for traveling with them in cabin. It's usually cheaper than pet sitting and cheaper than the emotional strain of being separated. So worth the investment, and not usually those other paperwork online certificate things are not really they're not what you need, and it's also not going to get you the results that you're looking for.
Yeah. It sounds like the more people who stretch the rules and break the rules and everything, it just makes it harder for the rest of us who are trying to do things right to even be able to take our dogs with us at all.
Absolutely.
Which is super lame. So.
Right. Like I, have this, anxiety buzzer in the back of my head. What if they ever change the rules where you can't even have a small dog under the seat? And I pay every time. I'm following the rules. He's an excellent traveler. I want to do everything I can to maintain access to that privilege. It's not a right to be able to take my dog with. It is a privilege, and I really, really am a firm believer in the more we can do to make sure that privilege is still accessible to us, the better.
For those of us who want to follow the rules.
Yes.
Okay, we have another question in the comments that I'm going to put up here really quick. So this is super specific. I'm going to read it for you because I think it doesn't show the whole thing here.
Okay.
This is super specific question, but 1, do you check your luggage and then use your personal item as supplies for what you need? So treats, water, etc. And then 2, it sounds like you use a roller bag. So what do you do with all of your personal items you need during the flight?
I love this question, and I'm going to really dive into my packing routine on the webinar. I'm going to give the whole breakdown of this is what I put where, and this all the things that I consider. I generally, when I'm traveling with Jamie, I travel really light, and I generally travel with a one carry-on roller bag and Jamie's carrier. And I don't generally check luggage, but I will asterisk that by saying I travel very light. And for personal items, I'm going to do a combination of, I specifically pick a carrier that has a laptop sleeve. So I can put a small laptop, my iPad, or a book in that section, and it's part of the carrier. And I have a very small personal item bag that I travel with. And when I am going to be boarding, I combine that and put that either inside Jamie's carrier with him, and then take it out when I'm on the flight. Or I put it inside my carry-on bag. So that's where my passport, my phone charger lives in this, very small kind of almost fanny pack size bag. And then I do combine it when I'm getting on the plane, because, some people may not, or some agents may not care, but they're usually on the airlines that I fly pretty specific about 2 items only. And so I just take it and put it in the carrier with Jamie. He uses it as a pillow until we get on the plane, and then I pull it out and I put it next to the carrier under the seat. So that's my routine. I also choose my carrier to have some pockets for treats and dog supplies and things like that. Yes, so that's the main thing. If I am traveling, generally I'm traveling for my longer haul flights. I'm generally traveling with my partner, and so he will have 2 pieces of luggage, and with his own gear in it. So I'm not putting a ton of things in there, but because I have majority of Jamie's stuff in my bag. I will sometimes be like, hey, like I'm out of room.
Yeah.
I try not to overdo it because we all have to pack in our specific ways. But if I need, there's only been one, trying to think, there's been one time when I needed a little bit more space. I forget if it was like Christmas or whatever, but I did check another small bag, like another like sling bag backpack. I try not to check my carry-on suitcase primarily because I have a better time, and I think Jamie has a better time if he is on the roller bag as we're going to the airport. It's a smoother ride for him than carrying it
like
as
on his back, or on your back,
which so it's smoother for him, and then also my shoulders don't hate me at the end of the ride if he's been, his weight has been on the roller bag. So I do try to avoid checking that if I can, but if absolutely I needed a little bit more space, I have checked like an auxiliary backpack or something, and then just really slim down the things that I need to carry on with me.
Okay, that's smart. And good thing too, whenever you're traveling with a small dog, they don't need a ton of stuff. And the stuff that they do need, like it's usually this big.
It's very small. I always take a picture of, Jamie's, because we've gone to Europe for 4 weeks and 5 weeks. So I have all of his food and it's like one big Ziploc.
Yeah.
I send it to my friend who has a 70-pound dog. I'm like, no.
That's what people get so mad at me because most of my friends have big dogs, and I buy those like 5-pound bags of kibble, and that lasts me for like multiple weeks. That would last me a day and a half. It's always very convenient.
Yeah, sure.
I think we've got one more question here, and then from there we can start wrapping things up unless anybody else has any more comments they want to or questions they want to pop in the comments.
Yeah.
But our last question here, do you make any special considerations for traveling with dogs who may be reactive to certain stimuli they might encounter in the process? I know we lightly touched on this a little bit.
Yeah, I think knowing what those stimuli are helps you to incorporate it into your training plan. I think we'd never know completely what our dogs might react to as they encounter different things. But I want to have a plan to support them in the moment if they are feeling reactive. Like Jamie, in one of his earlier flights, we walked by, we were kind of in a quiet concourse of an airport. I can't remember which one. We walked by so he was walking. I don't always have him walking in the airport concourse, but it was a deserted concourse, and there was this sign that had like a life-size human on it.
Oh my gosh! Yeah,
kind of like I don't know if there was an AC on, but it was kind of moving, and he like froze, gave a little like reactive startle. And so having a plan for those moments, like what are we going to do when our dogs have a big feeling about something, and if that's something we work and rehearse outside of the airport, just being like ready to rehearse it inside of the airport, because you're overstimulated too, and so sometimes it can be hard to pull those things out right away. So just rehearsing ahead of time and saying, okay, if we have a hard time, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to touch a treat, toss it away, get my dog moving. The nice thing is with our small dogs is we can pick them up. I don't use that as a every time, all the time thing. But if it was an emergency, I would just say, okay, we're moving, and then set them down at a distance and help them recover. So having a plan ahead of time, looking for things that replicate those scenarios outside of the hard airport environment. And then I think it does go back to our initial question is like, is this dog a good fit for traveling? Like, if they are finding things to react to at every turn, and they're using big behaviors, not only is this really compromising to them, like this, they're not having a good time, you're not having a good time, but also there are specific rules and guidelines for dogs in airports. And if we have a dog that can't meet those guidelines, then they may not be the right dog to be in that environment.
Yeah.
And many airlines are starting to incorporate things into their policies of a dog is barking in the gate area, they may refuse entrance to the flight. Like they don't.
Okay.
I read that in a couple airlines policies. I think they're updating. Okay. So they're starting to be like, yes, your dog behavior in the gate area can even affect like how they feel about letting on the plane. So like, if you are feeling like your dog may be a bit of a reactive dog candidate in that environment, you may want to think about like some of the implications of that and whether it's a good fit for bringing them along. I think also there are some things we can do to just set up our situation differently. So if we have a dog that's maybe a little bit more likely to bark at things, maybe find a calm, dead gate area to hang out.
Oh, that's
and then
smart.
And then we go to the gate and they're already in the carrier, they're not, maybe they're feeling more comfortable before we get to the gate rather than hanging out with them at our gate for a length of time.
Yeah.
Finding some quieter locations for them to be decompressing a bit in the airport environment and being ready to turn it into different training opportunities as they come up.
Yeah, that's really smart. Just going and hanging out somewhere else where it's a little bit less chaotic. I mean, I can even think for mine, that would make all the difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. Just cute comments. Somebody said, not surprisingly, I'm packing too many things.
Human curse. I've had to work really hard on cultivating my packing, and Jamie's presence has certainly catalyzed even more, slimming down.
I feel like I'm either just way overpacking and I don't use half the things I bring for my dogs, or I'm sitting there and I'm like, there are so many things I left at home that would be really useful right now. Right. It's never any in between. I haven't mastered my packing list yet. Okay, well, that's all the questions I have for you. Do you have any parting thoughts or anything? Any kind of main takeaway you want to give here? I know I just threw that at you. So.
No, that's okay. I think just like, I love small dogs so much, and for the opportunities that they give us to do more things side by side. In some ways, our big dogs get a lot of the credit for being the adventure dogs, the always up for anything dogs, and I truly think that our small dogs have the potential if we, give them. Excuse me.
Yep.
Of course, my voice would go.
Always happens.
I think if we give them, I don't know where it went, but give them the opportunity to learn how to feel more comfortable about different things and treat them just like we would treat a big dog in a lot of ways, which sounds, kind of cliche to say, but I think the more that we incorporate that into how we support our dogs, even on the ground, the more comfortable and confident they're going to be in all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that's my big thing. I'm sure that's the hill I'll always die on. Our small dogs are still dogs, and they still deserve to do all the dog things. So and you're so right. Like, they can be so much more. Not so much more, obviously, but like they can be extremely convenient, and they can make taking them places with you and going on adventures with them like even more accessible because of their size, which is why I think most people should have a small dog.
Agreed.
Coming from a former big dog owner, I am a full small dog convert, right?
They're pretty great.
Yeah, they're wonderful in so many ways. But that's all we have for you guys today. So I do want to let y'all know, for those of you who are still here with us, Amber does have an upcoming webinar that she's talked about mentioned a couple times here. And it's going to be next Tuesday, right? Tuesday. I want to say it was, I just checked right before I got on here, and I want to say it was 8 p.m. Eastern time.
Yes, that is correct.
And your time?
6 p.m. Mountain.
6 p.m. Okay, 6 p.m. Mountain. Yep. And I'm going to both paste the link to sign up for that webinar in the comments of this. And then I'm also going to post it in the small breed dog training group. So it's going to be posted in multiple places. $20, super great price. And you're going to get even more information than you've gotten here. Here we've been kind of talking about concepts, but Amber's going to go into way more depth about a lot of these topics.
We're going to talk about training. We're going to talk about TSA routines. We're going to talk about packing. We're going to talk about regulations and how to check regulations for where you're going, and know what health clearances and paperwork and how to navigate that process. And of course, it'll be different for every country and destination, but I've learned a lot. So we're going to talk about all of those, setting up the paperwork side of things, the training components. I'm expecting it to be about probably 2 hours of content.
Awesome.
And done. And it will be recorded. So if you can't attend live, but want the content, we'll send out the recording link after the fact.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so there's going to be tons of information in that 2 hours of content, which is awesome. Anybody who is planning on traveling, wants to travel, not sure how to start, definitely sign up for this webinar. I'm signed up because, like I said, I'm also a newbie to flying with my dogs. So I have a lot to learn too. But I really enjoyed talking with you. This has been great.
I will talk about small dogs anytime.
Oh yeah. I'm sure I'll have you back on here at some point too.
Awesome. I love it.
For anybody else who is watching this now or later, if you are, an enthusiast in a certain topic, it can be relevant to small dogs. It can just be about dogs in general. Or, you're a trainer, there's something you want to come on here and chat about, and, there's just something you want to nerd out about with us, please let me know, and we'll have another live here soon.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
I will talk to you guys soon. See y'all later.
Bye.